Happy New Year, everyone! But before we can bring in the new year, we have to celebrate our old year. So let's take a look back. We'll look at the most surprisingly good, we'll look at the most disappointing, we'll look at the worst, and then we'll look at the best. Also, one thing I need to be clear about, look at my ears, why do they? One thing I need to be clear about is these are my lists, my own personal opinions, and they're compiled only from figures that are in my collection. Thanks to you guys, I get to take a look at a lot of different figures from a lot of different collections, and I get to judge them appropriately according to my sensibilities, but I'm not entering them into the list. If I were to, it would change some of the things that are on my list, but these are just lists of my personal opinion from my personal collection. And don't forget, Hungry drops tomorrow at midnight for all you New Year's partiers. Party animals. And if you don't know what Hungry is, you're new to the channel, go look at Burn and Solid Unit and you'll understand. Let's get started. So let's start it off with a good and then we'll end on a good. It's like a compliment sandwich here at the Old Skull Cave. So we're going to start off with the most surprisingly good figures of the year. The figures that impressed you that you didn't necessarily think you were going to be impressed by. The figures that wowed you when you thought you knew their limits. Or the figures that surprised you when you thought they were made by a terrible company. You know, so the Marvel Legends kind of as a whole are my number 5. And they're not represented a lot on these lists, and I'll tell you why. They started improving a whole lot last year, and we've kind of seen them ride that wave. They haven't really sunk down, they've kind of just maintained. Every now and then they impress you, every now and then they let you down, but for the most part, they've just kind of rose up and stepped their game up a notch. These are just some of the figures that I think have been the most kind of rewarding to have on the shelf. This Black Panther is absolutely brilliant, and then the Deadpool obviously is a nice touch, and then the Wolverine. And I also wanted to show, those are actually die-cast Wolverine upgrade claws that a buddy of mine, Paul, shout out to Paul C., he hooked me up with a set, and they're brilliant, and you know they'll never bend and stuff like that, which is nice. But yeah, and let's also talk about the phenomenon that happened this year. Collectors as a whole, generally speaking, were anxiously anticipating a Marvel Legends X-Men wave. When was the last time, if you collect these, if you're in this game, if you're not in this game, then you don't know what I'm talking about, but if you are in this game, you know in your heart you were genuinely excited about a Marvel Legend wave. When is the last time that's happened? You know, when you were counting down the days, when you saw that in-stock notice and you had a little moment, you know what I mean? That doesn't happen, and they made it happen because they did characters that people have wanted, they did them fairly well, and they released them at an affordable price. And I take my hat off to the Marvel Legends crew. I think they're doing a great job, and I hope that they continue. Number 4, KFC's Wreck-Gar. With the exception of the transformation of the backpack, I think this figure really knocks a lot of things out of the park, and it integrates a lot of different things. Softer plastics, die cast, paint apps, coiled springs, like it utilizes a lot of tools, and it's just, to me, this is a huge growth for them. For me, their blaster was a huge growth, and I think this is almost proportionately the same from their blaster. Like, it seems like another huge step forward for them, and it's made me excited about a lot of things they have in the future, and hopefully they're on par. And spoilers, this ain't the only KFC unit on this list. My number 3 is this this third-party Krang, and you know, it's not that I expected it to be bad. It's just, you know, it's a new company, and anytime you deal with a new company, you know, you have some anxiety and you have some concerns and some worries, and this is one of the rare examples where you deal with a new company and they kind of blow out your expectations, so to speak. So I think that this is one of the most impressive figures of the year, honestly, but it's definitely one of the most surprisingly good figures of my collection. And my number 2 most surprisingly good figure of the year is Masterpiece Inferno. And the reason why is not that I think this figure is perfect. And like I said, I think it does some things perfectly. And like I said in my review, you know, it has made me question a few things in terms of how I see collecting and so forth. And those are totally true. But what I think this figure represents is this figure represents a stride that Takara has finally hit. I think we've had a lot of recent letdowns from Takara between the lack of paint on Shockwave, between the lack of aesthetic likeness on Ironhide, the kind of fiddliness and almost floppiness of tracks, you know, etc., that we've kind of been let down for a while, and this is the figure that finally kind of nailed everything. Now, whether or not it's too plain for you, I totally get that, but that's what they're going for. So if it's too plain for you, maybe they did it right. Do you know what I mean? So I think that this is them finally falling into step with this new kind of regime they got over there, and I think that this is hopefully the beginning of a lot of great things to come from them, that they can kind of climb their way back to the standard that we want to hold them at. And my number one most surprisingly good figure of the year is KFC's supplement for Victory Saber, which is their Simba. And who would have thought that KFC would have made a product that was functional and that was solid and that looked the part and that made the masterpiece the weak link in a formula? I wouldn't have. So I think for that alone, it needs to be regarded as the most impressive and surprisingly good third party, or in my opinion, figure of the year. And there they are, my most surprisingly good figures of the year. And it's just I think most of it is just companies that I haven't been thrilled with or haven't known about or have a kind of idea of where they should be, and then them expanding that standard, and I applaud all of them. I really find it interesting that, KFC and X-Transbots is interchangeable, right? And I really find it interesting how I think KFC has improved so much, and I don't really feel like X-Transbots has improved all that much over the course of this year. X-Transbots has definitely improved overall from their kind of first releases, but over this year I haven't seen much growth there. So I do find that interesting. But yeah, I applaud all these companies and all their efforts on what I consider to be fairly significant improvements. Which brings us to the most disappointing figures of the year. With this doesn't mean that all these toys are terrible. It just means that they're disappointments. And it's not that these two are the best representation, but for the number 5, I have to mention the Star Wars Black Series as a line that is kind of slipping on a standard I think they once established. Now, the good news is we've seen a return to that standard with this latest wave between Revan and Obi-Wan and the AT-AT pilot and stuff like that. We've seen some really good stuff. So hopefully they're on the upward swing now, but it did sort of hit a slump here for a minute. It did sort of do things that we don't expect them to do. I would have expected a little bit more of a brilliant finish on C-3PO. I would have expected a cloth cape with Krennic that wasn't obnoxiously ridiculous looking and hindering of articulation like this plastic coat is. And so it's not that it's just these two that are disappointing. I'm just using these two as good examples of representations of issues that the Black Series has been facing over this year. But hopefully we're on the upward climb. Hopefully it produces an amazing Jaina Solo figure, am I right? Number 4 is Mafec's C-3PO. And this is a bit tricky because the R2 I really, really like. But the problem with this one was, once again, functionality. Things falling off of it. I had to basically glue the hands in because they just kept falling off the figure. And that's a thing where, this is the opposite, right? It's the opposite of a figure that's getting ready to come up very shortly. Next, this is something that looks really good, but it performs very poorly. And that's an interesting question to kind of take on, I think, as a collector, is what is more important, something that performs or something that looks good. And I see it both ways. I really do. But this one is done so poorly in one direction that it has to be noted and it has to be explained of just how big the letdown is when it looks so good, but it functions so poorly. Unlike the inverse of that, which is number 3, Takara Tomy Masterpiece Ironhide. Now, I understand that a lot of people are a fan of this figure, and I get it. I do. It's well built. I totally agree. The problem is, for me, is that it looks way too off. It's too left field. It's too far removed from how I see the character. Now, I know it doesn't bother some, and that's fine. And that's your win. Good for you. But for me, it's obnoxiously distracting. Every time I pick it up, I'm reminded of how off it really is, and how kind of dissatisfying it is to have a character represented in this manner that has a pretty big part to play in the franchise that you love. So while this thing is built well, painted well, all those sorts of things, incredibly engineered, and I totally agree, I hate the way it looks. I think it looks ridiculous. I really do. And it's from a company that shouldn't be making things that I think look ridiculous in my opinion. It's Takara Tomy Masterpiece. It is the standard. I've said that before. They set the bar. So if they can let something fall so far in terms of aesthetics, as far as I see it, it's a huge letdown for me. Number 2, for my most disappointing figure of the year, is Fans Toys Lupus. And the reason why is because like I'm such a fan of this company. You know, I think that they make a stellar product. I've always said, you know, Fans Toys, Mastermind Creations make toys, not necessarily in that order, are the top 3 third-party companies. So when you get something like this, it's a big blow to how you kind of hold a company in your mind and you know, in your thoughts and in your heart, you know, for the caliber of toy that they make. And like, I understand that not everybody's cockpits slop down and stuff, but enough people's have where it needs to be mentioned, you know. And then, you know, the articulation issues and the ankles, it's just like, I expect better. You know, the price is nothing to be scoffed at, so why is the product something to be scoffed at? And that for me is a huge letdown. And the most disappointing figures of the year for me are the Neca Sdcc exclusive Turtles in Time, I believe was the game. I could be wrong about that. The Ninja Turtle arcade game representations of the Turtles and Foot Clan. And I think it's because like ever since I saw the reveal of this, I was just, you know, like beside myself. I loved this game as a kid. I remember playing the game in the arcade and racing home to draw the characters as I remember them from the game. And to have a representation of these, like it wowed me. You know, I was really taken back. I was really like just, you know, I was excited. You know, I think it's the most excited I've ever been about turtle figures, and I've been looking forward to the SH Figuarts one and then the Neca ones, the 1/4 scale, etc., etc. But I was really legitimately excited about this, and then when you get it in hand, they don't really work, and paint is chipping, and the functionality of them is so low. It's just, it was a huge letdown at a premium price, at least in the secondary market. So yeah, #1 most disappointing figures of the year for me. So there you have it, my top 5 most disappointing pieces of the year. And you know, I think that we need to look at this, right? Because a lot of this is just, you know, poorly made pieces from reputable companies. You know, that's where the disappointment comes, is when you hold a company or an aesthetic or something, you hold something to a standard, and then that eventually lets you down, right? So this isn't a knock on these companies. This is a knock on the product that a company that you trust is creating. You know, I think there's no better way to represent disappointment. So now it's time for the worst figures of the year, and this is my #5. And look, it's not that it's terrible. It made the list because it is the most obvious example of an overuse of a mold. I imagine that the mold is kept like Darth Vader in Rogue One. Like deep in the Takara factory, there's this Bacta tank that's guarded by like 2 Takara Royal Guard. And they just keep an eye on the MP11 mold and watch it carefully to make sure that there's no interference and no sabotage to the mold. They just treat it with medical Bacta tank juice in the hopes that one day it could return to its former glorious self, and it just doesn't seem to be the case. It's just getting worse and worse. And I'm in for Dirge, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound, old Skullface. But I'm in for Dirge, and then I'm happy to kind of move on with my life and put this chapter of it behind me. And that's why I felt the need to put this on. Now I will say, you know, he'll stand fine on a shelf and he'll display well, but that's about the extent of this guy's function. #4, Pajama Jammy Jam Luke from the Black Series. Every now and then, Hasbro does something which is just the ultimate example of the lowest common denominator of what they are capable of doing in the sense of fouling something up. And this is the perfect storm of that. The soft good laziness, the lack of paint details, the only thing that really got the paint love was the wraps on the legs. The overall aesthetic, the face sculpt, etc., like everything just sort of falls short here. And it's a line that I think has a lot of potential and gets a fair amount of love, so I'm not exactly sure why the finances... Oh, there it is. Somebody commented that when they do the soft goods over top, they give them double joints, and it's true. But it's just... It's a bummer. Let me look at it. It's a joke, you know? And, like, I had this... you know, I had him out at Skullfest, and I remember people walking by, and I remember the jokes flying, you know? And it's just unfortunate that a company with so many resources, with so much money, with so much potential, and a line that has a arguably stellar reputation could make something kind of so poor. #3, PlayArt's Kai Superman. And it really pains me to do this, in the words of Starscream. I love PlayArt's Kai. And I'm just I think it's this idea that, you know, the figures have gradually increased in price and decreased in quality. And I mean, this literally, and I understand that play arts usually have a more exaggerated and stylized aesthetic. I get it. But if you're making a movie representation of something, it shouldn't be this exaggerated. It shouldn't be this off. They've made movie-style figures in the past, and they're not this far off. They're Catwoman from Dark Knight Rises. They're Joker from Dark Knight. It never is this off. Adding things like the thigh swivel, but taking away the way that they used to do the shoulders and such, it's unfortunate. And it's a bummer, because I think when I first started collecting, this was probably my favorite company to deal with, just because it was so bloody consistent. And now it's just become almost a joke, unfortunately. And it's really sad to see. And it's not like they don't have the resources to make something better. And I hope that they do. Here's hoping for 2017. And number 2 of the worst 5 figures of the year, we have Lyle Kaiser from TFC. Hades, I think was his name. And this is just, you know, this is just the ultimate kind of example of a company not progressing, of a huge investment and an absolute bummer of a payoff. Now, I've got him pretty stable at the moment, but it's because he's kind of a mess. Like, if you look at his heels, they're turned inward. There's stability issues, there's engineering issues. Aesthetically, no real issue. The problem is in the efficiency and the effectiveness of the figure. And the main thing that a figure should be able to do is display. And if you can't even do that, well, then you've got to go back to the drawing board. And this was just an absolute bummer. And the worst figure of the year, TFC's Detective. It is just a nightmare. It is an absolute abomination. And I've never been so pleased to hit a figure with a shovel. And if you haven't seen that, I advise you go back through my catalog and sort of look it up. It's worth a watch. The phrase masterpiece should mean something. And it has gotten a little loosey-goosey with some of these companies kind of thinking that they're making masterpiece figures. To me, masterpiece, I understand that it's a Takara brand, but to me, it's bigger than that. To me, it is a standard. It's a pride thing. Like, you're saying this is the ultimate example of something. And this is not the ultimate example of Hound. It's the ultimate example of worthlessness, maybe? I don't know. A terrible, terrible, terrible figure. And there they are. Just the absolute bummers for me for this year. Just in so many ways. I feel like so many of these are so representative of so many larger concerns in the collecting kind of culture. So let's go through it real quick, right? So we have Hound kind of representing the worst that third party can do in terms of cost to product. And then with Lyle Kaiser, we have the culmination of that feeling of spending so much money on one kind of final payoff and it not paying off. Play Arts, on the other hand, we have this representation of a company with a stellar reputation kind of declining while the price is almost proportionately increasing. And then with Thrust, it's the same sort of thing, except the price is more consistent. But it's this use of this overuse rather of a mold and the degradation that can kind of cause. And then with Black Series Luke, it's kind of the representation of laziness, of just 100% complacency. And between all those factions, it's just the perfect storm for disappointment. And there you have the worst 5 figures of the year. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for, the countdown of top 5 figures of the year. In my personal opinion, of course. So coming in at number 5 is Make Toy Striker Manus, and I'll tell you, I didn't expect to like this figure. Chug is not really my thing. I expected to review it. I expected it to be of high quality, of high caliber, and then I expected to kind of never think about it again. But what I ended up doing is kind of just keeping him around. Not that I thought I was going to get rid of him, but keeping him around in the sense of, like, I just have him about. And when I have people down in the basement, like, I just, like, have him about for people to, like, pick up and mess with and kind of, honestly, to marvel at because of the fluidity of his movements and the action figure element of something that does transform. I think it is extremely impressive in that sense. So he's my number 5. Numero cuatro, Toy World Devi. And the thing with him was there were some hiccups along the way. You know, there were some stress marks. There were some pieces that were breaking on people kind of consistently across the board. There was just a lot of questions as to how this thing was going to shake out. You know, the parts forming and all that kind of stuff. There was just a lot of, I don't know, concern, a lot of anxiety. And then when you finally built it, you're like, great, googa mooga. It's incredibly solid. It's incredibly rewarding. It works extremely well, and the parts forming is probably what's responsible for that. It's a truly intimidating and menacing piece to have in your collection, and it works surprisingly well. And I think it has recalibrated a lot of people in the fandom in terms of how they view combiners and how they view parts forming in relationship to combiners. So a truly impressive piece and a very rewarding payoff for a $600 journey. Number 3, Fans Toys Stomp. And this to me, I think Fans Toys makes a good product overall. But this to me seems to be the culmination of everything they've kind of learned throughout their production history. The chromes, the paints, the materials, the articulations, the aesthetics, etc. It just hit every box going down the line. Just a very impressive, very refined, and extremely satisfying piece. Number 2, SH Figuarts Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, Michelangelo is out, but I haven't got mine yet, so I imagine he's just as good. But anyone who's not a stranger to my channel knows that I'm a big fan of this company. But even within this company's standards, these managed to really wow me. The diecast certainly didn't hurt, but then just down the line, little articulation nuances that I didn't expect, like in the torso, little nuances accessory-wise in terms of swapping out pieces on the belt to store the weapon and then to not store the weapon so that it looks flawless regardless of which way you want to have it, plus the absolute likeness to the characters they're intending to represent. It's just an amazing effort from a very consistent and trustworthy company. And drum roll please, figure of the year. And this shouldn't really come to anyone as a surprise. I was extremely excited about this figure since they announced it. I followed it with great interest and very closely throughout its production teases. And in the end, it's one of those things where you were so anxious, so excited, so looking forward to something, and then it actually paid off, which is it's just something that seems like it's too few and too far between. The shoulders do suck, but they're worth the price of admission to enjoy the overall piece. I think it's incredibly engineered for the most part. I think it's incredibly fun, and I think the little things that they did that they don't normally do, like paint finish on the chest and stuff like that, really brings this figure to life. You add that in with a brilliant face sculpt, a fun transformation, most of it anyway, and an impressive likeness to the character that you're trying to represent, and I think you can realize just how breathtaking this figure is and just how efficient and effective it is at what it's trying to do. An absolute edition or edition of a character that most people have wanted represented on their shelves for a long time. So I tip my hat to MMC. They're not always hitting on 1,000 for me, but with this one they certainly did. So congratulations. This is, I think, the second year they've won Figure of the Year, I believe. And there they are. What I believe to be the top 5 figures that I've purchased this year for different reasons. And I think anyone who has any of these will attest to just how good they all are and just how valued they are in your collection, or how they made you rethink your collection in some ways. Just phenomenal pieces and truly a testament to what some of these companies can do with a little pride. So there they are. Figures that had a huge impact on me, either positively or negatively, throughout the year. And I just want to thank you guys for another year of good times and videos and, you know, successful Skullfest and shaking hands at TFCon and hanging out and drinking beers and, you know, regular dude stuff. So I want to thank you guys again for being awesome. Don't forget, Hungry comes out tomorrow, first thing, midnight. Happy New Year. It's available on iTunes and so on and so forth, and also Google Play. And yeah, I don't see myself stopping anytime soon, so I'm looking forward to 2017, looking forward to what it has to offer, and hopefully we'll move onward and upward. But sincerely, thank you. I'm very grateful, and I think I have one of the strongest and, in my opinion, coolest group of viewers. So hats off to you. Happy New Year. New intro starts tomorrow. We have a few outros, a few intro and outros that are still left over from previously uploaded videos. But for the most part, new intros start on Monday for new figures, and new outro as well. So it's a new dawn, it's a new day. It's a good life for me, and I'm feeling good. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.